Hello, dear friends. It's time to talk about the economy because it is the clearest sign of change. Opinion piece. Falling dollar. Worst in 50 months. Stock market rally. Europe has entered a recession. Economic de-dollarisation. Banks bet on the euro. Patience will be rewarded. Money rules politics. Dollar and stock market move in reverse. World Food Pact suspended. G20 countries fail to agree. Let's start. The dollar's fall to the lowest level of the year brings down the roof of Wall Street. The 99-point dollar index is the support driving equities. The currency is at its worst point in 50 months. The euro is ahead of the dollar in its best run since 2004. Without the dollar support, Wall Street faces further upside amid market volatility and awaiting the Fed's upcoming rate decisions. The dollar and the stock market tend to move in reverse. They won. When it is said that the dollar and the stock market tend to move inversely, it means that in certain situations the movement of the dollar and the movement of stock market indices, such as the S&P 500 or the Dow Jones, have an opposite relationship. That is, when the dollar strengthens, it increases the value relative to other currencies, and the stock prices on the stock market commonly fall. On the other hand, when the dollar weakens, share prices tend to rise. News. Banking stocks led the Dow Jones upwards. A $500 billion corporate debt storm is building up in global economy. Robert Kiyosaki, author of Rich Dad Poor Dad, warns of a massive stock crash and fears an economic meltdown. Kiyosaki advocates the importance of financial education, economic independence and wealth creation through asset investment, real estate investment, business creation and ownership, as well as increasing financial intelligence. The introduction of the new gold-backed currency by the BRICS nations represents a pivotal moment in global finance, setting the stage for a possible seismic shift that could ultimately force the West to adopt its own gold-backed currencies. However, the G20 countries are unable to reach an agreement because of their disagreements over the conflict in Ukraine. This is the third time they have met since India took over the presidency late last year and failed to produce a joint communique. Brazil's economy contracted more than expected in May as investors bet on rate cuts. A delegation from the Argentine Ministry of Economy traveled to Washington to advance in its negotiations with the IMF to reformulate the current agreement to refinance a loan of $44 billion. De-dollarisation. The de-dollarisation of the world economy will continue, but it will not be a rapid process, says Marcel Salihov, director of the Center for Economic Analysis at the Moscow High School of Economics, in a piece published on Wednesday. In quotes, the Eurozone government bond market is fragmented by separate countries, many of which have low credit ratings. The Chinese yuan is not a freely convertible currency divided into offshore and onshore parts, and is under tight control of the National Bank of China. Gold as an asset can be a good hedge in case of crisis, but it doesn't generate any income and has low liquidity. Therefore, for central banks in developing countries, it is not so obvious which assets and which currencies can be alternatives to dollar assets, explains Salihov. In this context, Beijing is making efforts to internationalize its currency. In quotes, China's strategy is to secure the yuan's international status through international trade, not investment operations. In recent years, China has been actively trying to motivate and encourage its partners to trade in yuan rather than in other currency, the expert stresses. In particular, Beijing has created its analogue of the SWIFT system while developing its financial infrastructure and expanding international lending in yuan, as well as signing oil supply contracts in yuan, which increases the demand for the Chinese currency outside the Asian giant. Europe. Central banks are betting on the euro. They consider it to be the currency that will benefit most from geopolitical changes and aim to strengthen its reserve base. The euro is strengthening by leaps and bounds and will continue to do so, according to most central banks. Europe slipped into recession. With consumer spending in free fall, Europe slipped into recession at the start of the year, reinforcing a sense of relative economic, political and military decline that began at the turn of the century, notes a piece in the Wall Street Journal. Western sanctions and the health crisis have severely affected the European economy over the past 2 years. Some of the consequences are already being felt: high inflation, low productivity and rising commodity prices. Europeans have had to change their consumption habits and cut back on travel and leisure to avoid the higher cost of living, a problem exacerbated by rising energy prices. Poland will not open its market to Ukrainian grain after the end of the food pact. Russia halted its participation in the Black Sea grain export deal on Monday, 17th July, which was the deadline for its extension. The White House wanted that the decision would send price soaring, affecting global food security. Suspending Russia's participation in the food pact, in quotes, would be a wise move, as it will allow to maintain Russian wheat prices on world markets, said the president of the Russian Grain Union. Spain fines Amazon and Apple for alleged price fixing. Money speaks. According to Peter B. Mayer, the current financial crisis, with its unequal income distribution, disproportionate executive salaries, continuing real estate bubbles and spin-offs, along with surveillance, resembles more the world portrayed in the film The Hunger Games, that the democratic nations our ancestors bequeathed us. In politics, too, money rules. In fact, any politician knows that the surest way to win an election is to buy a lot of time on television networks. Political advertising and airtime is expensive. Political office will go to the candidate who spends the most on TV ads, but not to the one who is best qualified. Montagu Norman, governor of the Bank of England, explained, in quotes, "Debts must be collected and mortgages foreclosed as soon as possible. When, through the legal process, ordinary people lose their homes, they will become more docile and easier to rule through the strong arm of government enforced by a central power of wealth under the leading financiers. By dividing voters through the political party system, we can get them to spend their energy fighting over unimportant issues." Close quotes. Money is valuable only as long as there is not too much of it. The market can absorb a bit of fake money, but there is a limit, and that limit has been greatly increased, thanks to a global overcapacity of productions, financed by past borrowing and a huge surplus of cheap labor produced by the great expansion of the last 30 years. Today's central bankers are doing something only earlier bankers could dream of: printing money for years without causing much inflation. Reset news. Jared Rand conference call. Earth will be delivered from evil. Patience will be rewarded. Life is the most precious thing in the universe. All that the dark ones created is falling. Happiness is just a thought away. The good guys are setting things up for a major change. After the announcement, most people will be able to sit back and listen to the truth. Normal elections will be cancelled once the truth is revealed. They still want to confuse people with the central bank digital currency. Jared says we need the 10 days of darkness. The dark ones lie about everything. The naughty ones own all the media. We will not hear good things through the media until the white hats say it is done. The central banking system is a system of submission. Many coalition members have made the ultimate sacrifice for the transition of humankind. There is a power above the white hats, and there is another power above that. The banking and education system will disappear in the next few years. All the great new technologies are on the horizon. Focus on what you want, not what you don't want. It will be pure heaven on earth after the transition. Solar storm warning. Intermittent G1 class geomagnetic storms are possible over the next 2 days as the Earth's magnetic field reverberates due to a series of solar mass impacts since July 16th. The storms could intensify to G2 or G3 on 20th July when a new, more powerful flare arrives. And that's all for today. Thanks a lot, dear friends.